Emma, I have to say, looking at the notes you've prepared for today, it is truly a masterpiece. I think Shakespeare is currently weeping in his grave because he is so overwhelmed with jealousy.
Oh, stop it, Leo. You are making me blush. And your introduction just now? Truly Oscar-winning. I have never seen anyone read a script with such raw, unbridled passion.
Okay, we should probably stop before the listeners think we have actually lost our minds. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Leo.
And I'm Emma. And as you might have guessed from that painful opening, today we are decoding the complex, dangerous, and hilarious world of sarcasm.
It is a topic that seems simple on the surface, saying the opposite of what you mean, but it is actually a linguistic minefield. If you've ever been to London or New York and felt like people were being incredibly nice, but you also felt a strange urge to cry, that was probably sarcasm.
It really is a second language hidden inside English. And we aren't just going to cover the funny side today. We need to dig into the mechanics of it. Sarcasm involves tone, speed, cultural history, and even specific brain functions. If you miss the signs, you might end up thinking someone who just insulted your entire family.
Or worse, thinking your boss is thrilled with your performance when they're actually 5 seconds away from firing you. So let's start at the very beginning. Emma, where does this instinct come from? Because it's not exactly a nice way to communicate.
It's definitely not nice, historically speaking. The word sarcasm actually comes from the Greek word sarkazane, which literally translates to tear flesh or to grind the teeth. It implies a kind of savagery.
To tear flesh, that is vivid. It makes sense, though. Sarcasm is often described as verbal aggression disguised as humor.
Exactly. Psychologists often classify it as a form of passive-aggressive communication, but it's also a sign of cognitive complexity. There was a fascinating study published by researchers at Harvard and Columbia, which found that sarcasm actually promotes creativity. To produce or understand sarcasm, your brain has to jump between two realities, the literal meaning and the intended meaning. That mental gymnastics requires abstract thinking.
So, when I make a snarky comment, I'm not being annoying. I'm being an intellectual athlete. I like that interpretation. But let's look at how this plays out in the real world, specifically the massive divide between American and British sarcasm, because they are not the same beast.
They really aren't. Let's look at the sound of sarcasm first. In the United States, sarcasm is often signaled by a very specific prosody, that is, the rhythm and stress of speech. It tends to be heavy, slower, and emphasizes specific adjectives.
Right, I can demonstrate that. Give me a scenario.
Okay, imagine we are at a party, the music is terrible, and the room is incredibly hot.
I would turn to you and say, "Wow, this party is so much fun. I totally want to stay here all night."
Did you hear that drag? He stretched the word so and totally like a piece of chewing gum. That elongation is a massive auditory clue. In American English, if a positive word is dragged out, it almost always means the negative.
Now, contrast that with the British deadpan. This is where I always get into trouble in the UK. I never know if they're joking. Emma, show us how the Brits handle a bad situation.
Okay, same scenario. Bad party, hot room, terrible music. A British person wouldn't change their pitch. They would keep a completely straight face, perhaps look at their drink and say, "Well, it's a bit lively in here, isn't it? I'm having a roaring time."
See, that is terrifying. No stretching of words, no exaggerated tone, just a flat, normal voice. The only clue is the context gap.
Precisely. That is what linguists call the reality gap. Sarcasm lives in the distance between what is happening, the misery of the party, and what is being said. The British style relies heavily on understatement. While Americans tend to use hyperbole or exaggeration to signal sarcasm, the British tend to minimize the disaster.
Right, like the famous historical example of the British pilot who lost an engine and half his wing during a flight and radioed in saying he had a spot of bother.
Exactly. To an outsider, that sounds like he spilled coffee on his pants. To a British listener, spot of bother in that context screams catastrophe. This cultural difference actually causes friction in international business. There are documented cases where Americans didn't realize their British counterparts were furious because the British were using polite sarcasm to express anger.
Let's break down some specific techniques because our listeners need a survival guide. Let's talk about the brilliant mistake. This happens constantly.
Ooh, this is a classic. Imagine you're a waiter or just helping out at dinner. You trip, the tray flips, and glasses shatter everywhere. The entire room goes silent. Then your friend says, "Oh, brilliant. Well done, Einstein."
Now, obviously, they do not think you are the father of modern physics. They are using the semantic opposite. But the key here is the proper response. If you just say thank you, you look oblivious.
Right. In that moment, you have to acknowledge the sarcasm to save face. A good response is a self-deprecating return, like, "Yes, I'm a regular ballerina, aren't I?" It shows you understand the code and can laugh at yourself.
Let's look at another category, the backhanded compliment. This one is sneaky. It's like a Trojan horse. It looks like a gift, but there's an army of insults inside.
These usually follow the structure nice X for a Y. For example, "That is a really nice suit," for a guy who works in a car wash.
Ouch. So they are saying the suit is decent, but my job, and by extension my usual taste, is garbage. It creates a hierarchy where the speaker puts themselves above you.
Or the dreaded qualifier actually. If someone says, "You're actually quite smart," that is lethal. The word actually implies surprise. They are saying, "I expected you to be stupid, but you exceeded my low expectations."
That is brutal. But let's talk about polite sarcasm. This is the social glue that keeps us from killing each other at dinner parties. What happens when the food is inedible?
We have all been there. The host serves a cake that tastes like dry cardboard mixed with sand. You cannot say, "This is awful," without destroying the friendship. So you use code words. You might say, "Wow, this is a very unique texture. It's certainly an interesting choice of flavor."
Unique and interesting. The emergency exits of the English language. If a native speaker calls your idea interesting and then immediately changes the subject, they think it's a disaster.
It allows for plausible deniability. If the host asks, "Did you hate it?" you can say, "No, I said it was unique." You technically didn't lie, but you also didn't tell the truth. It is a very tightrope walk.
Now, we have to address the digital age. Sarcasm is hard enough face-to-face. In text, it is nearly impossible. There's actually a concept called Poe's law regarding this.
Yes, Poe's law states that without a clear indicator of the author's intent, like a winking emoji, it is impossible to create a parody of extreme views so obviously exaggerated that it won't be mistaken by some readers for a sincere expression of the views being parodied.
Basically, no matter how sarcastic you think you are being online, someone will take you seriously and get angry.
That's why we see the rise of the /s tag on platforms like Reddit, or the use of the rolling eyes emoji. We have to artificially insert the tone that is missing from the text. For example, if I text you, "Great job, Leo," after you made a typo, without an emoji, you might genuinely think I'm being supportive.
It's a dangerous game. I have definitely gotten into arguments because I sent a sarcastic text that was read as a sincere insult. Sarcasm requires a shared theory of mind. I need to know that you know that I know the truth.
And that brings us to the most important point of the episode. Sarcasm is fundamentally about relationships. It functions as a boundary tester.
Right. If I use sarcasm with a stranger, I'm just being a jerk. But if I use it with my best friend, it's a bonding experience.
Sociologists argue that sarcasm serves a solidarity function. By using it, you are essentially saying, "We are close enough that I can say the opposite of what I mean, and I trust your intelligence to decode it." It creates an in-group. If you and I are laughing at the unique cake, we are bonding over a shared secret.
So don't use it in a job interview. That's the takeaway.
Absolutely not. In professional settings, especially with new clients or superiors, sincerity is safer. Sarcasm is a spice, not the main course. A little bit adds flavor. Too much ruins the meal.
Let's do a quick simulation for the listeners to test their detection skills. I'm going to give you a situation, Emma, and you give me the sarcastic response.
I was born ready. Hit me.
So the dishes in the sink are getting kind of disgusting. It's been 4 days and they're starting to smell. I've been keeping up with my dishes, so hopefully you can get around to taking care of them.
I would stare at the sink and say, I absolutely love what you've done with the kitchen. The fermenting food really gives the apartment that earthy, rustic aroma we've been looking for.
Strong. The earthy, rustic aroma is a nice touch. Okay, situation 2. You are waiting for a bus in the pouring rain. The bus is 30 minutes late. A stranger walks up and says, "Waiting for the bus?"
This is the sarcasm of the obvious. I'd turn and say, no, actually, I just really enjoy standing in the rain. I'm trying to see if I can dissolve.
See, that is the defense mechanism kicking in. Sarcasm is often a shield against frustration. It lets us vent without screaming.
It transforms pain into comedy. Oscar Wilde famously said, sarcasm is the lowest form of wit, but the highest form of intelligence. And while people debate the lowest form of wit part, the intelligence part holds up. It requires quick processing speed.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on how to handle it if you are the victim. How do you know for sure if someone is mocking you?
Look for the micro expressions. The eye roll is universal, but also watch the mouth. A sarcastic comment is often accompanied by a smirk rather than a genuine smile, one corner of the mouth going up. And listen for the short answer. If you explain a big idea and someone just says, good luck with that, or whatever, in a flat tone, they aren't wishing you luck.
Whatever is the nuclear weapon of teenage sarcasm. It effectively means I have heard your words, processed them, and decided they have zero value.
We have covered the American drawl, the British deadpan, the backhanded compliment, and the psychology behind it all. I think our listeners are now fully equipped to navigate a conversation with even the most cynical Londoner.
I am of the opinion that they are 100% ready. In fact, they are probably so good at it now that they'll start leaving us sarcastic reviews.
Oh, I can see it now. 5 stars. Listening to this podcast changed my life. I used to be productive, but now I just analyze tone of voice all day. Thanks, guys.
Please don't actually do that. We have fragile egos. But seriously, try to notice sarcasm this week. Treat it like a scavenger hunt. Look for the reality gap. If someone says great weather during a storm, mark it down.
And ask yourself, why are they doing it? Are they angry? Are they trying to be funny? Or are they just British? Decoding the intent is half the fun.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening to us ramble. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode where we might or might not be serious.
Bye-bye.